All right, welcome back with an updated edition of the DPC Power Rankings here. And as per usual, as I've been doing for the past few weeks, no Eastern European teams are going to be included on this list. Obviously, we haven't had a start date for that second tour yet. And as we get closer and closer to that major that's going to be taking place in May, it's looking less and less likely that that's going to be happening, which is very unfortunate. But anyways, as we get into this list, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on anything you think that you agree with or disagree with in the comments down below. One thing I do have to feel the need to reiterate is that this is all my personal opinion. I try and watch as much Dota as possible, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have the same feelings about certain teams and whatnot. So I would love to hear you guys' thoughts in the comments down below about anything and everything that you agree with, disagree with, or anything in between. So, getting through the first portion of this list a little bit quicker. I say that every single week, but it's true. I do spend a little bit too much time on some of the teams near the bottom here, but I just like talking about Dota. Sue me. But starting off at number 40, dropping 2 spots from last week, we have Simply 2-Based. Simply 2-Based had a pretty decent start of the tour. Sure, it was a loss up against 4Zoomers, but there were a lot of notable highlights in that series and a lot to look forward to, with 4Zoomers being one of the better teams in the region and them putting up such a good fight. It really felt like maybe Simply 2-Based was going to have a much different tour this time around. And all 3 series that they've played since then have been absolutely atrocious, many games ending in just 20 minutes. So it's gone from bad to worse for Simply 2-Based, and I know they were able to avoid relegation in the previous tour. We'll see if they're able to do it again. But right now, they're number 40, which is not where you want to be. At number 39, staying in the same spot from last week, we have Brame. Not too much to say about Brame. They have their highlights here and there, but much like a lot of other teams in the past have figured out when coming into the upper division in Western Europe, it is very, very difficult to make a name for yourself. And lucky for Brame, they're not the only team right now in the upper division of Western Europe who's going through a massive slugfest right now, just struggling left, right, and center. So maybe that could be enough for them to avoid relegation, but as of right now, they're my number 39. At number 38, moving up 2 spots this week with a pretty fantastic week. I maybe could have moved them up a little bit more, but I'll leave them here for now. We'll see what they do in the coming few weeks. We have DogChamp. Fantastic win over Simply 2-Based. Again, rather dominant, and doing so with a stand-in, having Rayla Lisa, their mid laner, not active for this series, I thought was fantastic. And in the series that they did end up losing this week, that being to Quincy Crew, fantastic series all around. Again, even though they lose that, they have a fantastic game where they take a game off of Quincy Crew, specifically Rayla Lisa, who was not even present in that series against Simply 2-Based, popped off on his Storm Spirit in that one game. And for DogChamp, again, I could have probably moved them up a little bit more. We'll see what they do in the future, but overall, a pretty fantastic week for DogChamp. At number 37, I have Magma, staying in the same spot from last week. Same thing with Brame, not really a whole lot to say about Magma, kind of going through the same struggles of dealing with the upper division, and a lot of really powerful teams in this upper division really struggling to get a foothold, and they suffer a pretty rough loss this week up against PSG.LGD. So we'll see if they can turn things around, but so far, not looking the best. At number 36, dropping 1 spot from last week, another team in China having their own struggles. We have LBZS, who is now 0-4 on the season already, which is pretty atrocious. After being one of the teams that I was most excited to watch in the previous tour, especially since they avoided relegation, I thought it was fantastic. These guys have been having a really difficult time in this tour, suffering a 2-1 loss to RNG, in which this was probably their best series that they've played throughout the whole tour, but they still aren't able to get the win. So we'll see if they can pick up a few wins to avoid relegation once again this time around, but it's not looking good. Speaking of not looking good, we have my next team at number 35, dropping 3 spots from last week, and that is Execration. Execration goes 0-2 on the week, not the best time around. They did have a pretty decent series against Fnatic, having a game off of them. They kept picking the IO in that series, however, and it just didn't work in either of the games that they picked it. They then lost 2-0 to T1, so for Execration, they are now 0-4 as well. And for a team that I didn't think was necessarily one of the stronger teams, maybe one that could avoid relegation once again, it's looking less and less likely as time goes on. And sure, they're playing against some of the best teams in the region, but they haven't looked the best in those series regardless, so we'll see. At number 34, Staying in the same spot from last week, we have Enigma Galaxy from Southeast Asia. Makes sense. They haven't played any matches since the last one. Their next match is going to be later today up against Fnatic. That's going to be a really, really fun match. That's going to be a very difficult one for Enigma Galaxy, but an important one to avoid relegation. They got away lucky with a win over Boom that was over a technicality. We'll see if they can at least use that to avoid relegation. Also staying in the same spot as last week, and I believe this is going to be rounding out the bottom row here. We have Hikori. They go 0-1 in the week. They lose to Beast Coast 2-1. Not the best week, but overall, I just think that their placement on the board, it just kind of feels right. It was a pretty decent series. They had their highlights here and there, but still hoping to see a little bit more from Hikori in the coming few weeks here. At number 32 now, moving down 2 spots from last week, we have The Cut, who goes 0-1 in the week. They had a pretty rough loss against TSM FDX. I don't bust them down more than 2 spots just because it's TSM FDX, and they have looked fantastic for the past, 3-4 months now. And for The Cut, they just kind of got caught in their way. So hopefully this doesn't end up affecting their tour too much. They had their great series that they had last week up against DogChamp that I'm hoping that they can convert that into more momentum. But for now, they're my number 32 team. At number 31, staying in the same spot from last week, suffering another loss, we have Balrogs. And for Balrogs, I feel like this was a team that has a lot of potential. They have a lot of people that really want them to succeed, and they're just kind of struggling to get the results to back it up. Not without effort, though. They are putting a lot of effort in. You can really see it. They're playing very well. Their drafts are pretty good. And in this series, they did have a draft penalty of 110 seconds, which is leaving only 20 seconds of reserve time in the draft, which is not a lot whatsoever. But regardless, Balrogs, again, one of those teams that I think is able to do much better than they're actually performing, and their results are not really representative of their actual skill. I'm hoping that they can start picking up some wins before the end of the tour, but this past couple weeks has not exactly been kind to them. Following that, at number 30, speaking of a team that's been having a pretty fantastic time, jumping up 6 spots from last week, we have Infinity. And again, when you're closer to the bottom, it's a lot easier to make your way up the list with just a couple good series or maybe just a really good week. And that was the case for Infinity. They take down APU King of Kings, and not necessarily a stomp of a series, but it was a series that they really needed to win, and they showed that they really wanted it and were able to take it out of APU King of Kings' hands, who were one of the better teams in the previous tour in South America. So very impressive series all in all for them. A very, very dominant game 2 and 3. Rises specifically on his Tiny was fantastic. And I'm just super excited to see what Infinity is going to be able to do from here. At number 29, moving down 3 spots from last week, we have Obi Neon. Obi Neon in the same kind of boat as Execration, although maybe not in a hole as deep yet, and hopefully that doesn't end up being the case. Things are starting to look a little bit dire for them. They are definitely one of the teams that is in the front running right now for relegation. We'll hope that doesn't end up being the case, but a rough 2-0 loss to Boom this week does not exactly make them feel all that much better about this past week, so we'll see. At number 28, dropping 3 spots from last week, and a lot of people may be shocked to see them this low on the list, but honestly, I just can't justify having them any higher on the list. And so that's why at number 28 on my list this week, we have Enigma Galaxy Western Europe. Honestly, ever since that 2-3 week span that they had in January where they looked fantastic, they looked like a rejuvenated team that was just playing with so much passion, so much fire, their drafts made sense, all their players were playing as well as we know that they can. Enigma Galaxy has had a pretty terrible past 4 months, and again, I don't think this is a team that might end up making it to TI. And I know a lot of people in the previous season were pissed off that Enigma Galaxy didn't make TI, saying that, there shouldn't have been as many South American teams when Kuroki is not making it to TI. But they're just flat out not playing well enough, and they didn't play well enough in the last year to have made it to TI. And right now, again, they're about to be relegated. They need to pick up another set of insane consecutive wins that they did in the previous tour just to avoid relegation. There's not going to be any major tiebreakers likely in this tour as well, so major seems to already be out of reach for Enigma Galaxy. It's still early. We'll see if they can turn things around, but it has been a pretty disappointing past few months for Enigma Galaxy and all the fans. So we'll see how they do in the future. At number 27, moving up 2 spots in the week, so capitalizing on some of these teams having a pretty rough time, we have Lava, who goes 1-1 in the week. But overall, I think it was a pretty great week for Lava. They take a 2-0 win over Infamous, which I thought was fantastic. They played very, very well. And then they do lose 2-0 to Beast Coast, but all in all, Beast Coast being one of the best teams, if not the best team in South America right now, I think they can come away with this feeling pretty damn good about that one win that they got. So they move up 2 spots, and right now they're looking like they're sort of getting themselves in the clear when it comes to getting relegated. At number 26, dropping 3 spots from last week, we have Vichy Gaming. Vichy Gaming, it's been a pretty disappointing past couple weeks. I was pretty excited for them when they made that roster change. I believe they brought in Yang and the replacement for Irving, and the first series that they had Yang playing for them was the first series that they won. I thought, this is great. They're finally going to start coming together and being one of the best teams in the region like we know that they can be and like they have been in the past. And they haven't really been posting up those results as of late. And so they suffer a 2-0 loss to Extreme, who, sure, Extreme is a very, very talented team, but I just really want to see more from this roster, more from Vichy Gaming. And for a team that had a very realistic shot at making it to the top 4 of China, which, granted, is very difficult, it's starting to slip away very, very quickly. And again, it's just a little bit disappointing. At number 25, dropping 3 spots from last week, we have APU King of Kings. Again, I talked about it when I talked about Infinity earlier. That's a series as APU King of Kings that you need to win. Only 2 slots for the major in South America. You need to win as many series as possible. You can only afford to really lose 1, maybe 2 series if you want to finish top 2. And King of Kings have already lost 2 out of their 3 series that they've played here. They're not looking like the same team that we saw in the previous tour, and their chances for making it to the major are already very, very slim. So, it just doesn't feel like they're playing with as much intensity as they should right now. So, a little bit disappointing, but they do drop down 3 spots to number 25. Moving up to row number 3 now, kicking things off with number 24, making their way into this new row, moving up 4 spots from last week, Extreme. Again, I talked about a little bit when I talked about Vichy Gaming. They win that series. And for Extreme, a team that came in from the lower division, obviously with a very star-stacked roster, they're making their way up this list very, very quickly. And honestly, if they were a team that was in this division earlier, they probably would be in the top 2 rows, maybe even the top row. But given the fact that they had to start near the bottom, they're going to have to make their way up this list, and they have been making it look very, very easy. Something I will say, though, is that they haven't played the powerhouses of the region yet, like RNG, Aster, PSG.LGD. I'm a little bit concerned when that does come, but so far they've really given me nothing really to complain about, and I'm just more so excited for those matches as opposed to worried. So, yeah, all in all, great past couple weeks for Extreme. All right, moving up 4 spots from last week, we have Entity, and I moved them up 4 spots even though they do lose their only series this week because I do think that I had them a little bit too low in the past. And sure, they are a team coming in from the lower division, but man, they have looked really, really good. And even in the series that they lose against some of the best teams in the region, like Tundra, like Gaming Gladiators, they look really damn good in those series even when they're losing. And they pick up a nice win over Brame a couple weeks ago. And all in all, I'm hoping that these guys end up staying in the upper division. They've been very, very fun to watch and have been more deserving of staying in the upper division so far than other teams here like Enigma Galaxy. So we'll see what happens in the next few weeks, but I've been overall pretty damn impressed with Entity so far. At number 22, dropping 1 spot from last week, we have 4 Zoomers. 4 Zoomers, another team kind of like Simply 2-based. I was really excited at the start. I thought they were kind of starting to make their next stride. They had their closest series yet up against Quincy Crew, showing me that, maybe 4 Zoomers is like right there. They're right about to break into the top 3. And then they had this setback where they lose to Wildcard Gaming, which was a team that they've been reliably able to beat for the past few weeks now. And Wildcard Gaming, to their credit, they really just took down 4 Zoomers quite handedly here. So because of that, I kind of just swapped them around on the power rankings. So 4 Zoomers drops down 1 spot, and Wildcard will show up later on this list. In fact, they're going to show up right now, moving up 3 spots from last week. Wild card. Want to know, big win over 4 Zoomers. I was super happy for them when this happened because they had a really, really difficult time beating 4 Zoomers in the previous tour, especially in the points where it mattered the most. If they had just beaten 4 Zoomers just one time in the 2 opportunities that they had in the previous tour, they would have qualified for the regional finals. And sure, when you're in a regional finals with other teams like Quincy Crew, EG, and TSM, the odds of you making it past 4th place are very slim, but they still would have gotten there. So overall, pretty impressed with Wildcard, and we'll see how far they're going to be able to take this run. They've been looking pretty damn good so far in this tour. At number 20, dropping down 2 spots from last week, we have eHome. 0-1 on the week. They do lose to RNG, which again is one of the best teams in the region, but still eHome, I don't really know. They should be a top 4 team, but with other teams like Extreme, who are starting to look a lot better and are slowly climbing up these rankings, I'm starting to get a little bit worried about eHome and whether or not they're actually going to be able to secure themselves a spot at the major, which would make it kind of bittersweet, the fact that if we had a first major, they would have qualified for it the first time around. But now that Extreme is here, it's starting to slip away a little bit, which is really unfortunate. I'm hoping that they can turn things around, but things have not been going the way that they should for them. We'll see if they can still qualify for top 4, but this has not been as good of a tour so far for eHome as I was really hoping for. At number 19, dropping down 4 spots once again, because I believe in my previous episode they also dropped down 4 spots to number 19, which means they started off at number 11. I had pretty high expectations for these teams after a very impressive first tour and a very impressive run in the regional finals, and that's Infamous. And it feels like ever since those regional finals where they got swept by Beast Coast in the grand finals, it's just been a real downward spiral for Infamous, losing to teams that they shouldn't be losing to, barely beating teams that they should be crushing, or at least the iteration of Infamous that was in the previous tour would have crushed. This has not been the same tour whatsoever for Infamous, and I'm starting to get a little bit worried. Again, it's starting to get a little bit slim already, their odds of making it to the major, and we're this early on. So for Infamous, they're going to need a quick turnaround if they want any sort of opportunity of making it to the major. They cannot afford to lose these matches anymore, and we'll see where they end up going in the coming few weeks. At number 18, moving up 2 spots from last week, despite the fact that they only lost their only series of the week, that is Polaris. They lose 2-1 to SMG, but overall, fantastic series. I think they just couldn't quite overcome their own draft. Again, falling into the same pitfalls as Execration was with picking the IO in the first phase in back-to-back games, which ended up with back-to-back losses. Not to say that the hero isn't possible to win with. Obviously, we've seen teams that have been making it look quite good, but it just really wasn't working out for Polaris, at least in that series. And so I'm hoping that they can get a nice turnaround. They've been a very, very pleasant surprise in the upper division of Southeast Asia, taking down some pretty notable teams. I believe they took down T1 a few weeks ago. So who knows, maybe these guys end up being a top 3 team. But right now, I've got them sitting at number 18. And at number 17, rounding off this third row, staying in the same spot from last week, we have Quincy Crew. Quincy Crew is complicated, and I touched on it last week when I talked about them, that they're getting results, they're getting the wins, and this is kind of the same as some teams down here that are playing very well, but they're not quite getting the wins. Quincy Crew, I don't think is playing that well, but they're getting the wins anyways. Overall, their play has been really sloppy. Their strategies haven't felt as clean and condensed as they did in the previous tour and even in portions of the regional finals. And it feels like ever since those 2 last series in those regional finals, it hasn't been the same cohesive stack of players that were known for Quincy Crew. So I'm hoping that they can turn things around. Again, because they're getting these wins, they're able to have these weaker series as long as they're able to really get themselves together and play much better once they do have to play against teams like TSM FTX, like Evil Geniuses. But as of right now, in this current state, at this point in the tour, halfway through, I can safely say that Quincy Crew right now, out of the top 3 teams in North America, is definitely looking the weakest, even though all 3 teams have pretty much the exact same record. So I'm a little bit anxious about the coming few weeks with Quincy Crew, but again, they've given themselves a nice cushion. They still have a lot of time, and hopefully they're able to turn things around sooner rather than later. Up next at number 16, kicking off our second row here, moving up 3 spots from last week, going 1-1 on the week, we have Team Secret. Team Secret, I know there's some people who we like to comment that they don't think Team Secret's playing all that well, and it's been a pretty polarizing tour for Team Secret once again, where they have some series where they look very, very good, and then some series where they look not so good. But honestly, for Secret, if I would have them lower, but if I'm honestly looking at the rest of the teams on this list that are below them, I think I'd pick Team Secret over the rest of them here. Again, using Quincy Crew as an example, a team that has been getting results but hasn't looked nearly as cohesive as we usually see them. So for Team Secret, I have them at number 16. It's not a super confident number 16. I think they have had their highlights here and there. Again, their series that they won up against OG and Team Liquid have been pretty great. Granted, that was a very, very close series against OG, specifically that third game. If you haven't seen that third game between OG and Secret, you definitely should watch it. But those two series that they lost against Gaming Gladiators and Tundra, those are, in my opinion, the two strongest teams in the region right now. So getting stomped by them, ultimately, if they're able to turn things around and get some wins against some of the other teams in the division, isn't that big of a deal. And so I'm hoping that's just the case. If they do end up picking up some more losses down the road or keep having these sloppy drafts, these sloppy plays, then yeah, I will be moving them down. But for now, if I'm honestly looking at the rest of the teams on this list below them, there's not a whole lot of teams that just really shout consistency at me. So they're my number 16 team, and I hope that makes sense. At number 15, moving up one spot from last week, we have SMG. SMG goes 1-1 in the week. They pick up a nice win over Polaris, like I mentioned when I was talking about Polaris, which is a series that they really need to win. Again, only 3 slots in Southeast Asia for the major. They need to get every single win they can. It is an incredibly close upper half of Southeast Asia's upper division. But then they suffer a pretty rough loss to T1. Not necessarily rough in the sense that it was a really dominant one-sided series, ugly beating type of series. But it's just a series that, again, SMG really needs to win, and they really need to show that they're able to beat the other teams in the region more reliably. And we haven't quite seen that much from SMG, but ultimately, I thought they had a better week than a worse one, so they do move up one spot. At number 14, staying in the same spot from last week, we have Fnatic. Fnatic was 1-0 in the week. Overall, I thought it was pretty impressive. They had a win over Execration. Same kind of things as talking about SMG. They need to win every single series they can. They have been so far, and I'm excited to see if they end up making it to the major. Not really much else to say about that. They didn't play all that much this past week. And at number 13, staying in the same spot from last week as well, going 1-0 on the week, we have Team Liquid. Team Liquid really needed this series as they've been getting off to a pretty rough start as opposed to what we saw in the previous tour where they were the top team, only dropping 1 series to Enigma Galaxy, and then they started off this tour 0-2. So this win, of course, it's over Brame, so it's not the most impressive win, but I'm hoping that this is a win that kind of snaps them back into form, and we start seeing the Liquid from the previous tour in this one once again. So we'll see what the coming few weeks will have in store for Liquid, but for now, they're sitting at number 13. At number 12, dropping down one spot from last week, we have OG. OG, ultimately, I only moved them down one spot. It's not the biggest deal. They had a very, very close series against Team Secret. I think they could have gone either way. There were their ups and downs in there, but ultimately, I think there were some other teams on this list ahead of them that had a slightly better week, which is why I moved them down. But overall, OG, still one of the best teams in the region, still having a pretty fantastic tour, and still should be a top 4 team. And I'm very excited to see how these next few weeks are going to go for them. At number 11, moving up one spot since last week, just barely missing out on the top 10, we have Thunder Awaken, who pick up a nice 2-0 win over Balrogs. Granted, like I had mentioned, it was with Balrogs having a drafting penalty, which was quite hefty, but still overall, I thought it was a pretty good series. They're still not winning me over with their drafts, and it does leave me some concern for when they do play against other powerful teams from other powerful regions. But so far, they're picking up the wins. They're looking pretty damn good doing so, even with not necessarily the strongest drafts. So I have them at my number 11 spot. At number 10, and I dropped this team down 2 spots, not because they're playing bad. In fact, they haven't played for almost 3 weeks now. They were supposed to play on April 1st, just earlier today, but that didn't end up happening because of the postponements in China, and that is Team Aster. So I moved them down just because they've only played one series so far, so I'm going to move some teams that have been playing very, very well up ahead of them in the meantime. This is not to say that Aster has been playing badly or anything like that, obviously, but until we get some more matches from Aster, I'm just going to temporarily take them out there so I can kind of have some of the cream of the crop in the top row. So yeah, not much to say about that. I'm excited for their next match, which should be on April 8th, which is another week away, which is a very long time. Aster will have been, by that point, not playing for like 4 weeks almost, which is pretty insane. All right, moving now to number 9 and rounding off this second row. Moving up one spot from last week, going 1-0 in the week, we have T1. T1, big win. Sorry, they go 2-0 in the week, in fact. They don't only go 1-0. They get a big win over SMG and then a big win over Execration as well. 2 series that they need to win. And right now, T1, they got off to a bit of a slow start. Again, that loss to Polaris was a little bit concerning, but they are definitely setting themselves up for a top 3 finish as long as they can keep up with this consistency. Everyone on the team has been looking a lot better. Gabby has been fitting in quite well. I think the drafting overall for the team has been very good at really making Gabby shine in these drafts. And overall, nothing to complain about this team whatsoever. I'm excited for them to be at the major. I think it's pretty fair for me to call that so far. Which means we are now entering my top row, which I will say right out front, not a whole lot of movement in the top row whatsoever. I think pretty much every single team up here had a equally fantastic week, and so kind of uneventful, but overall, I'm very confident with the teams that I have up here. So kicking things off at number 8, the only new team in this top row, moving up 1 spot from last week, we have Tundra. I believe this is the first time that I have Tundra in the top row of my power rankings. It felt like every single time they were starting to get near the top in the previous tour, they would have a utterly brutal series or fall back into old patterns that would knock them back down again. But I gotta say, they have been damn impressive in this tour. Saksa has been scary good. Like, he has been fantastic. And that 2-0 stomp over Enigma Galaxy, man, Enigma Galaxy cannot even, like, put up any sort of fight against Tundra. Every single time Enigma Galaxy has to play against Tundra, they get utterly destroyed. And so for Tundra, sky's the limit for them. I'm so excited to see them play against Gaming Gladiators, as both of these teams in this region have looked fantastic. And so let's just, fingers crossed that we have a brilliant series there, and hopefully it doesn't end up being a blowout. I'm really hoping it goes to 3 games and they end up being close. All right, I'm going to kind of speed through the rest of the list here because, as I mentioned, not a lot of movement here in this list. At number 7, same spot of last week, we have Evil Geniuses. They go 1-0 in the week. They stomped Simply 2-based in like 40 minutes. Pretty solid week for them. At number 6, staying in the same spot as well, and every single team here stays in the same spot. We have RNG, picks up a nice set of wins over LBZS and eHome. Overall, fantastic week. I was debating about moving them up ahead of the next team here, but I thought the next team on the list here also had a equally fantastic week, and that is Beast Coast, who picks up a nice set of wins as well over Hokori and Lava. 2 much-needed wins heading towards the back end of this second tour. And number 4, I have TSM FTX, who picks up a nice and easy 2-0 win over the Cut. I have at number 3, and this is another case where I was really debating on maybe switching my number 2 and 3 spot, but again, both of these teams had equally fantastic weeks. Boom, going 1-0 in the week with a nice 2-0 win over OB Neon. And then finally, at number 2 and my number 1 spot, number 2, we have Gaming Gladiators, who goes 2-0 in the week with dominant wins over both Entity and Team Secret. And at number 1, PSG.LGD, who goes 1-0 with a nice win over Magma. And they were supposed to have also played against RNG this week, which would have been really, really exciting, because I think right now those are the 2 top teams in China, but that was unfortunately postponed. So hopefully that does end up happening soon. But regardless, yes, this has been my power rankings. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you did, feel free to leave a like, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff. And I'll talk to you guys in my next video, which hopefully will be coming out soon in a new setting. I'm going to be changing up my setup a little bit here, which means I'm going to be a little bit inactive throughout the next few days. I know I've been quite inactive throughout the past couple weeks, but regardless, the next time you guys see me, I'm going to be in a new setup, which hopefully is going to be a little bit better, a little bit cleaner, a little bit more useful for me to use, a little bit easier for me to use. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you guys later on with another video. Bye.